I'm working on my lunar calendar, so I know exactly what the moon is up to, and this year's inspiration is coming from a planet that is 64.5 light years away, where it rains glass. It's called HD 189733b. Catchy name. I imagine the glass would be like crystal shooting stars blasting through the atmosphere. And I was thinking, what if all of these crystals landed on the planet and they start growing on the surface to create giant crystals the size of skyscrapers? So I practiced drawing some crystals, and I thought, if it's raining glass, at supersonic speeds as well, because apparently on this planet it rains at 5,000 miles per hour. If it's raining that hard, I thought the crystals would have adapted to stand tall to withstand all the battering from the rain. So I had all the elements, and now I just had to plan the layout of the calendar. I do one of these every year, and this is the classic layout that I like, so I thought I'll go with that again. It just works so well. And I thought, well, if the crystals are resembling skyscrapers, then what if I made it a skyline? So I was playing with the idea of a crystal city, and I was going down this sci-fi fantasy rabbit hole and imagining what a crystal city would look like. Like, who occupies these buildings? Maybe it's abandoned, left behind by an ancient civilization that got wiped out by some catastrophic event. And so everything was in place. I had the concept and the layout down, so I started to work on the more refined sketch. But the very first circle I made was the wrong size. I just got this nice new sketchbook, and it said it was A4, so I didn't question it. But I think they were counting the bit where they punched the holes in it. So I had to remeasure, make the circle a bit smaller, and now I could use that circle to build the frame. Then I had to make a grid for all the moons that are going to go in here. It's going to be a lot more work though, because 2024 is a leap year. I put a mark every 5 mil along the vertical and horizontal lines. And then I joined all these marks together to make a grid with hundreds of squares. I used this trick with a bit of scrap paper I had lying around, so I could find where the centre of the mandala would actually be. Then I drew this double seed of life here to help me divide the circle for the mandala. Now I'm going to put the moon in place for the night scene that's going to be taking place at the top of the calendar. Even though the planet I'm using as inspiration is bigger than Jupiter, I don't think it has any moons, but I'll just pretend that isn't the case and draw this nice crescent moon here. Then I drew in the crystal city. Kind of reminds me of Ralph Steadman's drawing of the Las Vegas skyline. You know, that classic drawing from Fear and Loathing. I rubbed out all the crystals for some reason, even though I knew I was going to be using a light box for this drawing. and I would need the lines a bit darker. Then I drew in all these lines as guides for the glass rain. Here I'm putting X's in all the columns that will need moons. After I put all these in, I was thinking that maybe it was a bit tight, but I thought I'll just go for it and we'll see if that pays off later on. And now onto the mandala. I used that seed of life again to divide it up. Then I started drawing in some petals. Instead of inking straight over the sketch, I'm using a light box. Well, I say light box, it's really just a lamp underneath a glass table. I once built my own light box out of wood and acrylic, and it's awesome, but I left it in storage in England. So even though I haven't been able to use it for 9 years, I still consider myself to be a light box owner. And so I refused to buy another one. So the lamp under the table will have to do until I'm reunited with my homemade light box. There's something so satisfying about using a light box though. Just like the outcome is so clean. And that's what I wanted from this calendar. I didn't want any distracting construction lines because it's very busy, this one. I had to draw hundreds of circles and it was quite monotonous, to say the least. There was definitely this urge to just rush through this and get it finished. But I remembered this quote by the disgraced Fresh Prince. He was saying that his dad asked him to build a wall outside of his shop, and he was daunted by this task because it was going to take ages to finish. And so he would go every day after school and work on this wall. You know, he had to dig the hole, he had to mix the concrete, lay the foundations, lay the bricks, all this. And like a year went by and he still hadn't finished this wall. And he just kept thinking to himself, this wall is never going to be finished. But what he learned while he was building it was, you don't try to build the biggest, baddest wall that's ever been built. You say, I'm going to lay this brick as perfectly as a brick can be laid. And you do that every single day. And soon you've got a wall. John Dunsworth, the dude who played Mr. Leahy in Trailer Park Boys, he also applied this thinking when he was building his entire house out of concrete. On his drive home from work, every day he would collect a bunch of rocks, everything else he needed, and then spend the weekend mixing cement and building. And soon he had a house. So that was in my head while I was drawing all these circles. I was just thinking, I'm going to draw this circle as perfectly as a circle can be drawn. And soon I had a calendar. So I drew all this crystal rain, and I liked the way it looked, but I think I put a bit too much detail in with like the shape of the crystal. And so I was concerned that there's not going to be enough negative space. Once I put in the darkness of the sky, it's going to overpower the rain. And yeah, I wasn't really sure what to do about that because ink is so unforgiving. You know, you can paint over it with white or whatever, but it just ruins it, doesn't it? So I had to try and fix it. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. At least the Crystal City turned out cool. Onto the dots. This is another tedious task that requires the application of the Fresh Prince, Mr. Leahy mindset. It's one of those things, the dots take forever and it's so taxing on the hand, but the effect is so much better than hatching, in my opinion, of course. I thought the only way to save this rain was to put a glow around it, seeing as each piece of rain could potentially cause a sonic boom. I think that's fair. I've learnt over the years that it's good to start on the dots before the outline is finished, so you can switch between the two. If your hand starts cramping up from doing all the dots, you can go and do some lines for a bit, then come back to the dots once you've given your hand a bit of a rest. Otherwise, you're going to end up with some kind of mangled claw by the end of the drawing. And is it worth having a mangled claw? I'm not so sure. And now the fun part, adding the moon's phases. These are from my time zone because I'm making this calendar to use myself, but I'm pretty far behind most of the world, so this will actually work really well for everyone. I'm GMT -5, the same as East Coast USA. Before I started making these calendars, I would usually look up the date of the full moon and I'd get ready with all my crystals and stuff, and I'd wait until the night to put them outside. And then I'd realise that the full moon was last night, and I'd check the date and it said it was tonight, but in fact the full moon had already happened in the morning, this morning, but after midnight, you know, in the early morning. And so I'd miss the peak. So to counteract this on my calendar, if a full or a new moon is happening in the middle of the night, so before 4 a.m. my time, but after midnight, I'll mark it on the calendar as the day before, so I can be prepared for the full moon's peak in the middle of the night. So the full moon is actually displayed on the night of the full moon, even if the peak is happening in the early hours of the morning, which would technically be the next day. I hope that makes sense. I got a few more finishing touches, some lines and dots here and there, and then it's all done, ready to hang. In the end, I'm pretty happy with how the rain came out. I think I saved it. What do you think? And yeah, my lunar calendar is ready to go for 2024. Make sure I don't miss a moon. If you want to make sure you don't miss any full moons next year, you can get this now, put it on your wall. You can buy it as a hemp print or get the printable version and print it out yourself. There's a link in the description to everything.